Welcome back to another episode of the Automotive Artistry Podcast. I'm your host, Miguel Perez. My next guest is a guy by the name of Tom Utley. If you haven't seen Tom on Instagram, you should definitely check him out. I think it's at King Tutley. But Tom is in a really specific part of the industry, and it kind of broadens because it's more than automotive. But through his company, Vaughn Industries, Tom recreates factory nameplates for a lot of industrial equipment. If you're not sure what I'm talking about, check out his Instagram. You'll see exactly what I'm talking about. And I'm a fan of these nameplates as it is because there's a lot of equipment behind me that I've restored, and I haven't been able to recreate these nameplates. And they're beautiful pieces, and the older you get with a lot of this equipment, the nicer they get. It's beautiful work that he does. He's created and developed processes for it. But aside from that, there's more to Tom. He actually works for Raytheon, and you're really going to get the side of a mechanical engineer. I believe he's the first one I've had on the podcast before, and you can really hear how intelligent he is, and he really thinks more than that. So hearing him talk about just the industry, all of them, really, the trades, and his thoughts on it, how we get the new youth into the industry and so on. He's got some great perspectives, and he's somebody who he's pushing for quality and wants to see all these industries, people who work with their hands like we do. He wants to see the best for us. So, Tom, thanks for making the time to do this podcast episode. As a fan of your work, it meant a lot for me. So, thanks again, and let's get started on this episode. All right, we're back to the Automotive Artistry Podcast, and my next guest is a gentleman by the name of Tom Utley. And Tom, hopefully I said your last name right. I try to do the best I can on these episodes.
Very close. Utley.
What is it?
Utley. Utley.
Ah, okay. Okay.
And
Uh,
it rhymes with ugly, and I learned that about day 2 of first grade.
well, it lasted with you for a long time, since first grade, huh?
Yes, sir.
Well, Tom, I think you might be the first mechanical engineer I've had on the podcast. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure this is the first one for me. But you're a person that I've followed on Instagram for quite some time now, and it's just interesting, with a lot of the stuff that you show on Instagram, which is a lot of these really nice engraved machinery plates. I also know there's a lot more about you, and I just wanted to start off with just what got you into the industry as a whole. What were your earlier days that got you into whether it was machining or anything like that?
Oh, great way to start. So, yes, by education, I'm a mechanical engineer. I did work as an automotive design engineer for a few years at Ford Motor Company when I first got out of grad school. And I was there during the period when Ford Explorers were rolling over on Firestone tires. And unfortunately, it wasn't a healthy time to be at the company. And because of the financial hardships of the organization, I ended up leaving and moving to where I work now, which is Raytheon, a big defense contractor. And slowly over the years, I've gone from, doing engineering as a day job to more leadership specific kinds of roles at the company. And ironically, I do more engineering at home in my home shop than I do working for Raytheon now.
Wow.
I'm a former woodworker. I made my living as an architectural millwright before returning to college when I was 26, and then went through school, went through grad school, and started my engineering career after that. So I grew up on a farm in rural Arkansas, and literally in the middle of nowhere, 15 miles from a town of about 4,000 people on a small family farm, just my mother and I, because my father had passed away, when I was young. I'm the youngest of 5 siblings, and Um, so at a young age, was left responsible for repairing equipment and building fences and building barns, and so I'm very comfortable working with my hands. But went to college, and I had two kind of career paths I was interested in, either architecture or engineering. And the school in the southeast where I grew up that I wanted to go to for architecture, Tulane University, didn't offer a scholarship, and ended up going to a school that did offer a scholarship, and they didn't offer architecture, so engineering it was.
Hmm.
And that's kind of how that path started.
So
I Yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say, so it sounds like woodworking is kind of like, at least for things that you did with your hands, uh, that was like an earlier on uh, part of your. Obviously, it's not the automotive industry, but I kind of look at it as, I don't know if it's like blue collar work or however you want to say.
Oh, for sure, for sure. um it's a bit of a circuitous path for me, at least. I
Hmm.
have a very non-traditional kind of educational, you know, history. I mentioned I went to school right out of high school, left the farm, first one to finish college in my family, and or to go to college in my family, I should say. The irony is, because of my rural upbringing, I was not prepared for life at a big university with 30,000 students. And I arrived on scholarship, and I promptly flunked out and left after 2 semesters with a 1.87 GPA on academic probation, swearing I was not cut out for college and would never go back.
Yeah.
So there were about 6 years there between that experience in college and when I returned. And a lot of things have changed in the interim. I had worked several years in the woodworking industry and gotten married. We were starting a family, and I realized my, income prospects were more limited maybe than we wanted for the standard of living that we thought we needed at the time. So I ate some humble pie,
Hmm.
petitioned to get back into school, and retook my freshman year, and ended up finishing undergrad in about 3 years, and then two graduate degrees in 2 more calendar years, mainly because I was older at that time.
Hmm.
I finished grad school when I was 30, and being married, being highly motivated, it makes a big difference.
Yeah.
So there
Well,
are different stages of life that different people go through.
well,
It
that
just
that's actually what I was thinking. Was there a moment in that it sounds like you maybe had a moment that you just suddenly you knew you had to change gears. Uh, and I think a lot of us go through that in our lives. There's a moment. It's like you go from flunking your classes to like I need to do something about this.
right.
Did you have that eye opening moment for yourself, or was it maybe?
I think it was just a combination of things. The company that I worked for, we were living in California, which is where my wife is from at the time. And the woodworking company, we did architectural millwork and retail store fixtures.
Hmm.
So think, display cases and entry doors and crown molding and wall panels, bookcases, those sorts of things, checkout stands
Hmm.
for retail chains around the country, you know, Toys R Us, Kids R Us, Hudson News, Barnes and Noble, those sorts of chains. We had contracts to build
Big
out
operations there.
packages. Yeah. And the company had about a 45,000 square foot industrial facility, big warehouse space. And my job was running that shop floor
Hmm.
for the father and son who ran the company. And I realized within, a short time, a few months to a year, I had entrepreneurial ambitions. Um, and those ambitions were not really compatible with continuing on at a $17 an hour hourly wage.
Yeah.
And it was just a few things that kind of lined up. Um, a lot of it had to do with my wife. and her encouragement to go back to school,
Mm-hmm.
and the opportunity came to reapply, and then against my you know expectations was allowed to get some waivers for classes I had previously flunked out on and retake those
Wow.
and basically start with a clean slate. So yeah, I it was an expensive experience that first freshman year, but it really taught a lot of really good life lessons, and I was a lot better prepared going back.
That's awesome. I mean, that's I think a lot of people can relate to that story right there. I mean, it's you think sometimes that you're going to be going a certain path and it's just going to change on you, as long as you're I don't know. You had the motivation, it sounds like. You really had the right people around you to help push you in in a good direction.
Right.
Especially your wife. That's a good one. My wife, she's in the industry too. She understands like a lot of the stuff. We understand each other, in our day to day, and that's having her push is a huge part of us doing the things that we're doing, now.
Yeah.
Uh, that's definitely something that people should appreciate. If you have that, that's a great place to be in life right there. Uh,
I can't imagine doing it any other way, honestly. I can't imagine either, going through life completely alone or going through life with somebody who doesn't share your aspirations and dreams. That would be tough.
It is, yeah. And I mean, I've had relationships in my past where, it just wasn't right for what was going to benefit me and the things that I needed in my life. Uh, and it's interesting how you start recognizing those things in over time and figuring out what's good for you and what's not. Uh, and even when you figure out that whether you're the problem, right? uh, But that's a like I said, that's a great thing. And I think especially at the point where you're at right now, that you could probably say that's a huge part of what got you to where you're at.
Yeah,
Uh,
certainly open doors with careers with starting at Ford.
hmm
I had kind of this master plan when I left grad school. I was going to start at the biggest company I could, and at the time, Ford was like a Fortune 4
Yeah.
company, really big. I mean, three or four companies bigger at the
hmm
time. And my plan was I would spend a few years there and then start moving down to smaller and smaller companies until I got to a point where, not being facetious, where I'd be missed if I were gone the next day.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Well, leaving Ford was a pretty easy decision
hmm
when the opportunity came along to move to Raytheon.
Yeah.
Now I've been at Raytheon 23 years.
Wow.
So my plan completely disintegrated. And why? Well, because of golden handcuffs, you get locked into pensions and, uh, 980 work schedules and Christmas break off and good benefits. And frankly, you start having children, your family, has a standard of living. And as the breadwinner of the family, suddenly it gets kind of terrifying thinking about leaving and putting all that at risk. And so you say, well, just one more year,
hmm
and then one more year, and then another year. And pretty soon you've been here 23 years,
Yeah.
and you look back and go, on balance, it's been really good. I have
hmm
no complaints.
Yeah.
I do sometimes wonder what it might have been like if I had gone out and, rolled the dice and risked a career move.
Hmm. Yeah, and there's no telling what different could have been in your life too. I
Yeah.
mean, what do you think? What do you think could have been different? Uh, in as far as like your career path, is there another avenue you think you could have gone if you hadn't gone into Raytheon?
Um, yeah, I think I would have been able to do more engineering. I love engineering. I love the thought process. I love the execution of an idea.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing in this world more fulfilling to me than to lay awake at night and envision something in my head and then going and making it and finding that it works and is useful. I think every engineer who listens to this will resonate with that. I mean, even if your engineering is software engineering, you conceptualize a solution to a problem, and then you go fix that problem. And it's
Mm-hmm.
very gratifying work. Um, I think in a smaller company or a different environment than Raytheon, I would have gotten to do a little more of that.
Yeah.
One of the challenges we have in the defense industry, of course, is we typically work for government customers, and you know, I might offend some people saying this, but um, we emulate sometimes our government customers' worst habits.
Mm-hmm.
We're not super nimble. We're not always as efficient as we could be. And, to compare and contrast my experience at Ford and my experience at Raytheon, when Ford designs a new vehicle, the company allocates a big budget. I mean, I worked an F-150 redesign program where the budget was $1 billion, and we had 47 months to get from kickoff to what Ford calls job one,
Mm-hmm.
where that truck is going down the production line at rate. Raytheon typically is a much more risk averse environment. And because we're limited on the amount of profit that we can make by our government contracting rules, we're also limited in to whom and how we can sell our products, of course,
Hmm.
for good reasons. The margins aren't nearly as good. And so the company uh, has a much more conservative approach to investment and leaning forward into automation and efficiency measures because we're not always guaranteed that the next contract's going to come,
Mm-hmm.
and we don't have as much influence over how to market the product or how to sell it. Oh, it's just a different environment.
Wow.
uh, the flip side of that is the upside is I get to work on some really cool stuff,
I bet.
most of which I can't say much about,
Yeah.
but um, you know, there's a mission there to protect the warfighter,
Mm-hmm.
the people who defend us. We try to make sure they get home at night,
Yeah.
back to their families, and there's a noble aspect to that.
Wow. That's really cool. That's it sounds like you have a lot on your plate over there. And actually what really when you were talking about engineering and your view of it, uh it I was like sitting there thinking it's like I have a question that I always ask people typically at the end of the podcast, and your description of engineering and what really drives you about it is this. It reminds me of my question I always ask people is where does creativity come from? And a lot of the description that you were giving me was just making me think of the creative process and just being someone who can create something and then use their hands or however they need to create that thing. Um, when I think of engineering, I'm not typically thinking. Uh, I don't know. I usually think of like drawings and things, people putting things together, on a computer or anything like that. Does the and this is me from a person who's not familiar with your background or even some of the definitions of some of these things. But is that engineering part of that process, that creative process? Like, what is it that comes to your mind on that, with, as far as the creative process and engineering?
Well, I think it depends. Um, Let me see how to set this up. I
Hopefully, my
think
question is
engineering.
clear.
No, no, no. I think I understand the question. If not, you'll have to let me know after I kind of muddle my way through what I'm about to say.
Yeah.
When you have full creative license, there are no consequences of being wrong. For instance, if I'm a graphic designer, some of the most creative, artistic people I know, true artists, are graphic designers.
Mm-hmm.
And the consequence of failure, if you're a graphic designer, is the ad image doesn't grab the consumer's attention, doesn't sell the product.
Yeah.
If I'm an engineer at Raytheon or Boeing or Lockheed or Northrop, um, and my product doesn't work, people die.
Mm-hmm.
So there are rules in place that limit our creativity, I'll say.
Mm-hmm.
And then on top of, I'll say, regulation and safety and just good design practice that, is accepted for, business reasons, legal reasons, ethical reasons, and so forth.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, our creativity is ultimately limited by physics.
Yeah.
We can't be any more creative than Mother Nature's going to let us be, and have the design be any better than it could be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So,
No.
is there a creative aspect to engineering? Absolutely. Um, when I was at Ford, we had a lot of kind of continuing education classes that we had to do, and one of the executives who spoke to us one time made a point that kind of stuck in my head. He said about 90% of all the design decisions that will ever be made at this company are made by the CAD designer sitting in front of the computer.
Hmm.
Why? Because they're closest to the product at its inception. They're, they have free reign at the early stages to lock in features and symmetries or patterns or methods of attachment that become really hard to change later after everyone else's work that joins with theirs, has to lock into place.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's the creativity aspect to engineering. There's always limitations that we don't have in, less restricted industries or functions.
Yeah.
I don't know if that makes sense.
No, it does. It does. It makes me think of creativity a little bit different in a different light, I guess I could say. Because in using the example of in your industry, that could be people's lives if something's not working right. Uh, and yeah, there's for sure. I know some excellent graphic designers, and again, that their product, their end result, it may not be to the client's liking, or maybe it doesn't help produce the sales, or it doesn't connect to the business. I actually think of a lot of these things not necessarily in the point of like anybody dying, but in other ways the creative process has to align with like a certain goal, because I've surrounded myself with artists, from people who do metal work, custom paint, all kinds of stuff like that. And a lot of us have come up to the same conclusion where we look at things and we create something, but then there ends up being some kind of parameter, on it. Something, whether, again, if it ties into the business, is there time to do that thing? And what can it affect? If I sit there and I overdo my creative process on a certain thing, there could be consequences in other things, even though that end result might be beautiful or whatever it is. Um, so with what I was hearing with you is I hear that some of those parameters, and for whatever reasons, and I think a lot of artists are also seeing that, is like, well, I may be used to a certain process, but I have to figure out how to tighten that up, or uh, change the speed of it, or be more efficient however I need to. I hope that makes any sense to you, the way I'm describing that.
Oh, it does totally. I think there's a producibility aspect to design as well that um, really creative people are great at visualizing and transferring their image onto paper or even into CAD tools.
Mm-hmm.
It's very enjoyable for me to watch people like Chip Foose or Eric Black
Yeah.
or Dave Kendig lay down beautiful, beautiful renderings of vehicles, and you
Mm-hmm.
think, "Holy crap! I would love to own that car."
Mm-hmm.
But then I think of the poor shop foreman and the technician out on the floor that has to build it,
Yeah.
and it doesn't always translate. I saw some of that even in my woodworking days. We would get engineering blueprints from an architect for, I don't know, I'm making this up, some display at a Barnes and Noble store.
Mm-hmm.
And the first thing we had to do was make shop drawings so that we could convert their vision into something that we could actually build.
Yeah. Yeah. That's that's a lot of work right there. I mean, it's one thing to visualize it, and then to produce it and create the thing and it work with all the different variables that surround it. It's a lot. I mean, some of the names you bring up, we've seen all these renderings, and then, like you said, then the shop has to be the one that's going to create that and make the proportions right and make sure that the design flow actually ends up working on the thing that you're working on.
Right.
It's a lot. There's a lot of different factors in there, and that all comes down initial design, again, creative process, and then what you actually have, what you're actually building. That these all these different aspects like come together and flow in one place.
Right.
Uh, so I kind of, like I said, my mind is I'm kind of going in the middle of what you were describing, and then how it is in the industry, and like when I hear well, some people's lives can be at stake, I start going, man, your business might be at stake, depending on these variables, and or your livelihood, and how you put that together as a part of the creative process. Because I think it's easy to think the painter painting a beautiful painting of the sky or a beautiful paint job on a car. It's like it's all of the things. It's not just those are just certain aspects of the creative process. But even figuring
Right.
out how to engineer your way into that, that seems like a major aspect there too.
Well, and it depends too. Are you making one-offs
Yeah.
where some failures of producibility can be forgiven,
Hmm.
or is the thing that you're designing intended to be mass produced? In that case, there's really no excuse for a failure in considering producibility. Um, you
Yeah.
you have to, businesses exist to make money. As hard as that sounds, and as idealistic as we might want to be, that's the point of a business, is to make a profit.
Yeah.
And if you can't make a profit, you can't have the business and provide the environment to be creative in. And so there's a responsibility even for, sole proprietor creatives, to themselves and to their families, to be successful, or else what are you doing?
Yeah.
So to me, it's a failure if an engineer designs a product that can't be manufactured, economically. It's not good engineering at the end of the day.
Yeah. That's when you think about the reproducibility of things like that, and going into the engineering, I still think of like being a woodworker and the things that you're creating. There's certain roles in that, and especially like in machine work, there's a lot of things like that where, I mean, the parts that you're making are pretty precision, and they have to be able to work as close as you can make them. Um, any of your woodworking or machine like your skills in machine being a machinist, does that play a huge role in your engineering background?
Absolutely, it does. So I mentioned I went back to college at age 26,
Hmm.
and I went through, like all freshman engineering students, went through the engineering freshman graphics class, requirement for orthographic sketching and projections, and ANSI Y14, GD&T, classes that every engineer, every mechanical engineer at least, needs to know and appreciate. I did well in the class, and then ended up, as part of that class, learning some CAD software. Back then it was called Pro E, now it's called Creo, and some of your listeners may use it or know of it. It's a tool to make solid models, and in some, extensions, do engineering analyses and motion studies, and even generate G code for CNC machining of whatever you just designed. So all that said, I kind of liked running the CAD software, and ended up becoming a TA my second semester and for the rest of my undergrad time in school. Part of that experience learning CAD led me to the mechanical engineering machine shop, making the parts. I'm like, I have this cool design on the screen. I want to hold it in my hand. I want to make something cool. So, you've got to go get to know the lab supervisor. And in my case, it was a a guy named Ken Forster. Ken had been there at the school for, I don't know, like 1,000 years, it seemed like, running the ME machine shop. And Ken taught me as much engineering, practical engineering, as I was learning upstairs from all the professors on the theoretical side. Things like tolerancing and, machining. He taught me how to use Bridgeport mills, how to use Moriseki metal lathes, how to, my first TIG weld was in his shop, and I still suck at TIG welding, but, you know, that's going to be a lifelong journey. I think TIG welding is kind of like golf. It's you against the bead,
Yeah,
but we'll get there.
yeah, maybe one day I'll show you some TIG welds.
Yeah. And I had this drawing that I brought in, um, as part of a kind of a paid summer project for the physics department, designing this telescope that it was being designed to ride on the space shuttle back at the time. I mean, we're talking back in 1997, right? So
Wow, yeah.
space shuttle was still a going concern.
Hmm.
And I walk in, I'm super proud of my drawings, and I've got this kind of hogged out aluminum tub where a bunch of electronics were going to sit in a, hermetically sealed space environment. And it was like 21 inches in diameter. And I had an O-ring groove specced out to, like, plus or minus, I don't know, 2/10,000ths of an inch. And Ken very wisely leaned back, and they had a relationship between departments where some of the jobs were actually paid, and
Hmm.
his department would invoice their department for the work. And I said, hey, I need to get this made. And he says, okay, I'm going to quote you for that plus or minus 2/10 tolerance, and I'm going to charge you a lot of money for that, and if you can prove I didn't hit it, I'll give you your money back. And I said, well, what do you mean? He said, dude, it's an O-ring. There's got to be 10 thousandths of crush tolerance on that thing. And second of all, you didn't spec at what temperature you want it to be measured at.
Hmm.
So it's little things like that, the
Yeah.
practical side of engineering. I ended up spending, you know, pretty much every free minute I could in the machine shop. I designed and built and operated my own injection molds,
Hmm.
a lot of CNC machine time, as much as I could get. I just loved it. And I think those lessons played a huge impact later when I went to Ford, and then early on in my career here at Raytheon,
Hmm.
in just understanding the practical limitations of my work, my designs, and then maybe more critically, when we outsource production to a supplier for
Hmm.
components, what are their limitations?
Yeah.
You get an appreciation at a company like Ford that does high volume manufacturing for statistics and statistical variation, and mean versus standard deviations. You understand process capability, and so a lot of the fitment issues and premature wear issues. I mean, ask GM how things are going with their new uh, their V8s right now that
Oh.
are really tight tolerance.
Hmm.
Really bad engineering story there.
Oof.
I could go on and on, but
Yeah.
practical hands-on experience early in an engineer's career, I think, would be invaluable for everyone.
So that really makes me think of the two sides of the coin that a lot of people, I feel like in overall in the industry is that you can hear there's the street smart versus book smart, right?
Yeah,
And it's like it's kind of like describing people who are good with their hands versus people who are, they know all this very specific information that's written down and all that. uh, Having both is the best thing. If you have experience in both things, I mean, not that every scenario exactly calls for all of that, but you having a mechanical engineer background, and you sound like you're both things. You're book smart, and you know how to make something work with your hands, and the reality of it. Uh, is that like the case for a lot of like these engineering type I guess people in that world? Are there a lot of people who do both, where they actually physically know how to create the thing, or are there a lot of people that just know the book smart but haven't been hands on?
Well, I think it's changed over time. I'm going to point to a very specific instance that I'm pretty passionate about. When I was in high school in Arkansas, even in my tiny little high school, I had 89 people in my graduating class back in 1986. So I'm dating myself here, but we had kind of a vocational technical course um, that, we had electronics, we had air conditioning and refrigeration, we had carpentry, and we had metalworking, so machining and welding. And I think a lot of my classmates, myself included, really enjoyed exposure to those trade avenues.
Hmm.
And I've watched over the last 30, 40 years, um, most schools have discontinued their we can call them blue collar or trade or
Yeah.
vocational education studies because we as a country pushed everyone into college.
Yeah.
Everybody needs to go get a college degree. I am vehemently opposed to that.
Hmm.
There are a lot of people who go to college who should not go to college, and they would be much happier and much more fulfilled and productive citizens not stuck in a cubicle all day. I see
Yeah.
it all the time. A
Yeah.
lot of the folks who have given rise to, the large creative channels on social media, on Instagram, Facebook, on, whatever, there are a lot of us who are frustrated creatives who work in cubicles every day,
Hmm.
but we're looking for an outlet. And so the rise of desktop publishing and now moved into desktop machining and accessible CAD tools like Fusion 360 that almost anyone can afford to have good solid 3D solid modeling tools, and 3D printers then came along. And now, I mean, like in my machine tag business, I'm using call it a desktop fiber laser, crazy technology that does amazing things that didn't exist 20 years ago. Certainly wasn't accessible.
Hmm.
So a lot of us are kind of finding second careers or, at least hobbies, if not second businesses, side jobs outside of the day job that, yeah, it pays the bills, but it doesn't fulfill us
Hmm.
necessarily. We now have avenues to go be fulfilled in a different way, using our hands, using our minds, and using these tools that didn't exist before.
Well, and the other thing too is, and I feel the same way, where the industry in that sense is heading. Uh, the other part with the education side is now you have so many more options that you didn't have back when college was being so pushed. Now you can, I feel like you can go more direct. You know, you don't have to go to a school where you're going to take all these other programs that have nothing to do with what you're really interested in.
Yeah.
And especially in our industry, yeah, you can find people that are doing the classes, or there's different organizations out there now that are just going into these niche, subjects where you can kind of hyper focus on what you actually want to do. Is when it comes to a lot of the engineering, uh, how much schooling did you have to take for a lot of that?
Well, an engineering undergrad for a mechanical engineer nowadays, some people can get through it in 4 years. Most people take five.
Hmm.
It's just a lot of work. It's a lot of hard classes. 12 credit hour load is tough your sophomore and junior years. They're just really challenging, unless you're way smarter than I ever was. And then if you go on to grad school, that's at least 2 more years. So
Wow.
call it 6 to 7 years that you're committed to get an engineering degree with a master's.
Is that getting you in the field? Like how soon can you get a job, or I don't even know if you're that green, like an apprenticeship, or what
Yeah,
kind of time frame are we talking about there?
I think in most areas, a good mechanical engineering student can start getting internships. They're between sophomore and junior year
Hmm.
typically. So you might have two internships under your belt before you come out, and hopefully one of those internships converts into a full-time job. And so as soon as you're out with a bachelor's degree in an engineering discipline.
Let's take a quick break to talk about one of today's sponsors, SATA USA. In the automotive paint spraying world, cup systems are crucial, and SATA has some great options with this, the LCS cup system, which means liner cup system. What makes it stand out is the uniquely designed liner that's really thin, so it actually folds over and makes sure you're getting as much material as you need out of it and not starving like other systems might. They're great whether you're in collision, restoration, or custom work, but especially when you're spraying thicker materials like polyester primers, getting into those hard to reach upside down areas like chassis or undersides where things can get complicated. Whether you're running the SATA RPS or the new LCS, SATA has you covered. Learn more at satausa.com today. Now let's get back to this episode.
You're typically going to be employable nowadays. AI is potentially going to disrupt that. I don't think we know yet how far that's going to go, but certainly with a master's degree in engineering, you should be employable right out of school.
Wow. Okay. Now, does that necessarily mean you've been hands-on? Other than, obviously if you went into an internship or anything like that, I'm sure that would be hands-on right there. But as far as the schooling, how hands-on are you really?
Well, I think like in any discipline, you're going to start out in assignments or roles where you can't do a lot of damage. You're going to be supervised. You're going to have a supervisor or a manager or a mentor or some kind of a functional lead over your discipline. If you're in mechanical engineering, you might be in a subspecialty. You might be in thermal analyses. You might be in physical, stress analyses. If you're designing wings for a 737, that's not going to be a freshman right out of school doing that.
Yeah. Wow. Well, thank you for your insight on mechanical engineering. I hope my questions on some of that made sense and landed somewhere with you. Because that's one portion of your life that's really interesting. I don't know too much about obviously your work at Raytheon, but what really drew me to you was so you actually, what do you call your business? Because you engrave, you fabricate these beautiful plates for machinery. I'd really like to get into this part of who you are.
Sure. So the side business is called Vaughn Industrial. It's V as in Victor, O, N as in Nancy, Vaughn Industrial. You can find me on a website. You can find me on social media. Here's where I'm gonna embarrass myself a little bit. My social media handle is King Tutley, and that started as a joke with my twin daughters when they're 24 now. They wanted Instagram accounts, and of course, being a good father, I wanted to monitor their Instagram accounts, so I had to have an Instagram account. So I'm King Tutley, and my wife is Queen Tutley, and all of that started back in first grade when kids being kids. I told you I learned that Utley rhymed with ugly at about day 2. At about day 4, I was just Tutley, and that stuck.
Yeah.
And it was from, this is way earlier than most of your listeners will ever remember, but the Tutankhamun exhibit was traveling around the world, and it was a big thing back when I was in elementary school that was coming to the U.S. So there's a lot of King Tut stuff going around, and it was a popular topic at school. And so I was just Tutley, and looking for an Instagram handle. All the good ones were taken, and here we are. It stuck. And in hindsight, starting a business and not changing my social media handle probably was a mistake.
No, I think it's a great name.
But once you're committed, you're committed. It's hard to migrate without losing followers. And so I get most of my business from Instagram. I don't advertise. It's just word of mouth and referrals from other people, and then I post pictures of finished projects when customers are okay with that. Share them, and that generates a fair amount of interest.
Yeah.
Way
No,
more than I ever expected.
that's what honestly what drew me to you, because I myself I love old equipment. So I got a bunch of machinery here in the studio that I've restored, and that painted it and done all this stuff. And part of what I love about old machinery, before we get too much into the plates, uh, it's the aesthetic of old machinery. It's something that you don't really get nowadays. And there's a lot of reasons for that. But old cast iron machines, there was just something about them that, like, I've said this before on the podcast at nauseum, is like I may have a machine sitting around that I'm probably not even going to use it. I just like it being there.
Yeah, totally get it. I have a theory. I don't know if I'm right, but I have a theory. I told you a few minutes ago how much I love doing CAD
Hmm.
and how much I love CAD tools and 3D modeling and all
Yeah.
that stuff. I think CAD is what destroyed that design aesthetic back
Hmm.
in the late 70s, early 80s. You look
Okay.
at the transition from cast iron tools that were made by pattern makers,
Hmm.
sorry, designed by pattern makers who sculpted and carved pieces of wood, really, with their hands and tools into, full scale um, shapes that they thought looked good to the eye versus, post the invention of 2D and later 3D CAD. It's hard to do curved surfaces, or it was
Hmm.
early on, and everything became an extrusion, a straight line extrusion of a 2D section.
Hmm.
And I think that's where the design of all the machinery kind of went off the rails. The only people, when that happened, the only industry really still doing physical modeling or physical models was the auto industry, where they're using clay.
Hmm.
They still do that today,
Yeah.
and it's fantastic if you ever get a chance to go into an automotive clay design studio. It's an awesome experience. But as far as the aesthetic of the tools that you and I love, these old machines, I just think a lot of it came from pattern makers, hands.
Yeah, yeah, and it's a really interesting part of the, and I get to talk to some interesting people that know these timelines for a lot of this stuff. 'Cause then some of this I start thinking of, like, um when a lot of the coach building type techniques disappeared and then are starting to reappear. Um, the time frames on that, where certain equipment kind of disappeared and then started coming back. So that stuff always interests me. And so you're saying you're thinking in the 70s, that's where a lot of those changes happened?
Yeah, if you look at, like, oh, I mean, I'll pick a topic near and dear to my heart, South Bend metal lathes.
Yeah, yeah.
I got into making tags to finish my own restoration of a 1943 16-inch South Bend lathe
Hmm.
that is still in my shop now. Every surface on that isn't machined is sculpted and, to me, very aesthetically attractive.
Hmm.
And then when South Bend kind of adopted more modern design tools in the 80s, everything suddenly became sheet metal wrapped around, a square surface.
Yeah.
And they're just, uh, maybe they perform better,
Hmm.
maybe they don't. I don't know. I think a lot of the advantages of a heavy cast iron tool are they run smoother. They dampen vibrations. They're quiet.
Hmm.
They can be very powerful. Of course, you can have power in a modern tool too, but
Yeah.
um, they're just a pleasure to use when they're working well.
Yeah, I mean that's like good a simple example, which maybe not simple, but you look at English wheels. English, you have the cast iron versions that were
Sure.
beautiful machines. Aesthetically, they're amazing. Uh, I don't know if what the performance difference is. I would imagine that it's a much tighter machine versus like the newer tubular designs.
The weldments.
Yeah. So that would you have two different aesthetics. Uh, I don't know how much deflection there might be versus another one. I would imagine, I think of the same with like bandsaws and like lathes, and how a lot of this stuff went from like cast iron legs to flat plate steel. And even down, actually, a really good example I feel like is on bandsaws is their wheels being these heavy cast wheels versus some of these lighter materials, aluminum. Uh, the changes in that, and how the performance of these older machines versus the newer machines as well, when you go from cast to plate steel.
Yeah, I agree 100%. The irony, one of the things as I've gotten into deeper into restoring these old machine tools for myself and others, I took um, a class called scraping, machine rebuilding. I don't know how many of your listeners will be familiar with machine scraping, but
Hmm.
it's a process where you can get a like a sliding surface on a lathe, like the bedways, for instance, very straight with a milling machine and even grinding. Ultimately, that's not the best surface for a machine sliding lubricated surface, though. The best surface is one that's broken up with little micro pockets all over the surface to hold the lubrication and float away, debris as the machine wears. And
Hmm.
the process that you use to create that is called scraping, and then there's another technique called flaking that's specifically, for lubrication direction and retention. But the two of those things together, ultimately, you're just working on the top surface.
Hmm.
Before any of that happens, though, a lot of these machines that get tossed to the metal recycler, thrown away at the junkyard, if you think about it, they're only missing like 0.0002% of the original machine.
Hmm.
But because that little tiny fraction of material that's gone, the ways are worn out and dished, and it's hard to make good parts anymore. So a lot of machine rebuilding processes are just to get all those traveling surfaces back straight again. So
Yeah.
so the machine's accurate,
Hmm.
and you can go down a really deep rabbit hole there.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's even some of the aspects I think of, again, kind of going on the simple route of shipping. Being able to take some of this equipment. I mean, a big cast iron machine, the weight of that and how you have to package it and everything that plays another role in today's society, uh, and how you can get it there. Although I don't know what the weight differences on a modern lathes are compared to the older ones. I'm sure there's a significant difference there.
Yeah.
Um, So I kind of get into that because that's one of the things that drew me in to what you do, because I liked all this old equipment. I restore it, and what tends to always be left behind is the nameplate, because there's not a lot of options for anybody.
Yeah.
And this is your side. This is actually your business that you do on the side. You mentioned that on here. Um, you know, you restored one of your I think you said for the South Bend lathe, that was one of the first plates you had to
Yeah.
restore.
That was my first foray into machine tag um, reproductions, making plates for my own lathe. Yes.
And so that's your foot in the door at that
Yep.
point.
Yeah. So back in, I don't know, 2013 or so, 2012, um, I don't know, maybe a little later, 2014, we were living in Huntsville, Alabama, still working for Raytheon, but I found an ad on Craigslist for what was labeled as a wood lathe. And I'm like, that looks bigger than any wood lathe I've ever seen. And I was curious, and I went to go look at it. Turned out the lathe was sitting in a little side room attached, that had basically been built around it, on a pool hall in Huntsville, Alabama. And it was this 16-inch by 60-inch, so it's 9.5 feet long, South Bend lathe from World War II. And the gentleman who had used it and owned it had just died recently. And he was using that lathe to make and repair pool cues, billiard cues. Turned out he was quite famous himself. He had, championship pool cues that shipped all over the world. But after he passed away, the owner of the billiards hall, he didn't have anybody to do repairs for his customers anymore. And the person that he was bringing in wanted the space cleaned up, didn't want to use that lathe, so it had to go. I ended up field stripping this lathe down into the smallest chunks that I could move out one at a time through the doorways, and got it home and started this 1.5 year long rebuild project, and all the pain that went into the lessons learned about dealing with old machines. It was a absolutely fantastic learning experience. But
Yeah.
long story short, I get the machine mechanically restored, looking beautiful, more accurate than it was when it left the factory in 1943. And I go to put the plates, the nameplates and machine tags back on. And because they were done during the war years and all the restrictions on brass, these had been done in zinc. They were highly corroded. There just wasn't enough relief in the etch left to do color fill anymore. And so I decided that I was going to figure out how to make these. And that started me down a rabbit hole of chemical etching. You make them, by a mask and etch process in brass, and then doing different ways of color filling. And ultimately, I figured out a process to make all the plates from my lathe. And then, being the nerds that we are, we show our friends. And I happen to have the very good fortune of having some friends with large YouTube channels. And I don't mean this in any way name dropping, but when I lived in Alabama, I had the fortune to meet Adam Booth and Keith Rucker, who are also from the Southeast US, through machining channels. And I ended up making tags for both of them, and they ended up sharing them on their social media. And then that started the phone calls coming. Hey, can you make this? Hey, can you make that? And what became ultimately Vaughn Industrial sprung out of just word of mouth referrals through social media.
Yeah.
For people looking for a source for the unobtainium of new nameplates.
It really is like what a niche business right there, because it is anyone who has old equipment, even if they've painted it or anything, I guarantee you that nameplate looks exactly the same way.
Yeah.
It's worn out, corroded, beat up, and like I said, there's like no options out there. There's I don't know how many people are doing what you're doing.
Well, there aren't very many, and there needs to be more.
Yeah.
Because I can't keep up. So anybody listening, if you're curious, hit me up. I'll teach you everything I know.
That's awesome. That's awesome. That's and it's so funny because the tie-in, I mean, it's easy to think of old equipment for these nameplates, but it's like all these classic cars, VIN tags, plates on the doors, to whatever the description is, and even custom. I've always liked that idea of having those nameplates on a custom build or anything like that, which I think I've seen you do a few plates for some great builders out there. Actually, I think I saw one for Fender Garage recently.
Yep.
That's really cool. That's a beautiful idea. Like it just adds so much to the character of the car. The same way it adds to the character of that machine that you're using. And a lot of people don't really, depending on who's listening, they're sitting there going, nameplates. What do they mean by nameplates? these nameplates, like on old equipment, they were beautiful. Some of the stuff, you go to your Instagram, some of these multicolored plates and the engraving that's in them, or the embossing, all that stuff, like they're beautiful. Like they are such a nice piece, but they always look worn out.
Yeah, I mean, there's an aesthetic aspect to it. There's frankly there's a functional aspect to them. I consider all of them functional art.
Hmm.
They communicate important things, not the least of which is the pride of the builder, the manufacturer. You might just have a basic logo plate, but man, you go back to the 20s and 30s and 40s, and some of these builder plates are just
Yeah,
amazingly beautiful pieces of art, industrial art that showed their pride of, in their product, and
yeah.
they were proud to put their name on it. So car builders today, especially, I love the car builders.
Hmm.
They've put 2, 3, 5 years into a high end build, and they want to put their name on it with a date and a serial number, maybe a customer name to memorialize this project.
Hmm.
And I love doing those
Yeah.
because, frankly, we're starting with new artwork. I don't have to tediously trace necessarily, something that's hard to see from the 1930s.
Hmm. And that's funny you say that with the tedious part, because it gets they I feel like some of these plates, they basically tell you how to operate the machine.
They do, or they tell an electrician, the electrical specifications. They tell you how to correctly lubricate the machine and keep it in working order.
Hmm.
It's not just it's not optional. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, yeah. That's how instructions used to be back then too. When you look at
Yeah,
some of these machine manuals, they basically told you how to remachine the machine itself again. I'm being exaggerated, but
yeah.
the owner's manuals were, uh, you had all the information you need in an owner's manual at one point.
And I'm finding now, a little bit of a maybe more pointed example for the industry you represent.
Hmm.
I get a lot of requests for
Okay.
um, resto mod jobs where, for instance, Land Cruisers, they do a drivetrain swap, and the shift pattern decal or placard that's up on the glove box of that Land Cruiser, they have a different shift pattern. They have a different transfer case. And so, in the original style that looks like something Toyota would have installed back in
Hmm.
the 70s, I can make one that reflects the correct pattern. And I
Wow.
just love doing that.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's updating an original design.
Correct.
That's cool. Yeah.
And
That's. Go
it's
ahead.
everything from, I did a new process transfer case tag here this past week. Um, Man, I'm doing German Bosch horns for a for a high-end Porsche rebuild. And there's two tags in the set because it's a dual tone horn setup.
Hmm.
And so there's a layout for one, and then you wash it off and do a layout for the other, and get two new tags out of it. I'm doing a etched brass, and then chrome plated tag for a high-end French roadster build from the 20s. Right now, it's at the chrome shop as we speak. I'm waiting to pick that up this coming week and get that delivered. Man, in the car world, it's everything from magnetos. There's a big kind of renaissance in people who know how to rebuild and make magnetos work now.
Wow.
Old 6-volt systems
Hmm.
on classic cars, so they can function like they did back when they were built. And making those plates, I get, maybe once a year I'll do a set for a high-end build that's going to like Pebble Beach or SEMA or something,
Hmm.
and I'll get a frantic phone call about 2 weeks before saying, hey, we were stripping paint and we found another tag. Is there a way that you can turn this thing around in a week before we head off to the show? And of
Yeah.
course I do. I
Yeah.
I, I will always support somebody's deadline to make a show.
That's
So
awesome.
no problem.
Hmm. Wow. Well, I mean, we're talking a lot of different types of tags, and I mean, going back from your first one, you had to have developed a process that got you to the point where you're at now with all of these different options. How was that? How was developing your process? How long did this take?
Well, it took me about 6 weeks to figure out how to make the first one. A lot of failed attempts and a lot of experimentation in chemical etching. So, for my South Bend, the gearbox plate, the first thing you need to make any new tag is you need an accurate etching mask. So that's artwork. And I will say right up front, about 2/3 of all the time involved in everything I do is artwork
Hmm.
on the computer to recreate the original design. And um, I'm a little bit in the weeds here, but just for people's curiosity, there's kind of two kinds of artwork formats out there. There are raster files.
Hmm.
These are like JPEGs that everybody's familiar with. They're where the image is made up of a bunch of millions of little tiny dots,
Hmm.
and that works fine if you're doing chemical etching because you're going to print that in reverse and onto whatever medium you're using for masking. Maybe you're making a silk screen, or maybe you're printing directly onto a mask material that gets heat transferred. But either way, you're printing that probably with a laser printer and then getting the mask onto the metal. And you're going to mask all of the parts that you want to stay full thickness.
Hmm.
The parts you don't mask, the etchant, the chemical, usually something like ferric chloride, um, it's going to eat away the metal down to whatever depth you need it to in that process. It works well um, if you don't have super fine details. If you do have super fine details, you're going to be limited on how deep you can go before the mask fails, because with chemical etching, as it's eating into the face, well, it turns out once you get down a little bit of depth, it starts eating sideways underneath the mask as well. And so there's going to be a point where you're limited how deep you can go before that mask gets eaten away. So
So,
originally I started chemical etching just like that.
uh
And I
huh.
did that for a couple of years. I got a process that worked really well. I made a tank with a bubbler, an agitation system, to get a more even etch. And I did that for a couple of years, and it worked great for brass.
Hmm.
Turns out it's not good at all for aluminum. Aluminum, again, a crossover to my Raytheon experience. Aluminum is a component in rocket fuel. And the reason is because it's highly reactive, and you get it in a chemical combination with something like ferric chloride, and there's a chemical reaction process that kind of runs away thermally, and the hotter it gets, the more it eats, and the more it eats, the hotter it gets, and pretty soon you've got a boiling mess on your hands. And it's hard to get a mask that will survive that. So aluminum was my big challenge, and although I could make pretty much any brass plate for a couple of years, any aluminum plates I didn't have a good solution for. So I discovered fiber lasers, and I started outsourcing aluminum etching jobs to a local laser shop, a gentleman who is still a good friend today. He does a lot of firearms engraving and that sort of thing with the fiber laser. And we did that for a couple of years. And Jeff, the owner of the shop, one day said, "Tom, I love the jobs you bring me. They're a great, diversion from the production work that I do." He goes, "But dude, I know my lead time sucks. I know I'm eating up all your profit. You need to go get your own laser."
Hmm.
And I'm like, "Oh, there's no way I could possibly afford my own laser." He's like, "Dude, you can't afford not to have your own laser.
Yeah.
Seriously, go research it." And he gave me some good advice on brands and experience and software and that sort of thing. And long story short, I ended up, with my wife's blessing, committing to a $40,000 purchase that we financed,
Hmm.
uh, originally over 5 years. I ended up paying it off in 2 years.
Oh,
That
that's
was
great.
3 years ago. And now I'm really ready to go get a second laser to kind of speed things up.
Wow.
So the laser etching, there's no chemical process. The difference is you've got to have now the second kind of artwork, which is vector artwork. In vector artwork, all that really means is the design is a collection of mathematical points and lines and curves that the laser can use as a boundary. And it's kind of like programming CNC, it's just in 2 dimensions. And the laser runs on its equivalent of G code, just like a CNC mill does.
Okay.
And so I take that vector file and program the laser to go etch away the parts that I need to be in relief. And then I add the color fill after the etching is done.
So we're talking, you have 2 different processes for etching the material, and I kind of want to go back to that, the acid. So what you're talking about is you're taking like a type of stencil to go over the material.
Yep.
And then whatever is exposed is what gets eaten away by the acid.
Correct.
And that's how you're getting your 3-dimensional look out of the plate.
Yes. And that works really well in red metals, brass and bronze, and copper. It works great. And the etchant that most people would use for that is ferric chloride. Knife makers will be very familiar with ferric chloride because it exposes, the grain of knife materials once they've shaped and formed them.
Now, is this a traditional method?
It is.
Okay.
And the only difference, my puppy's wanting some attention right now.
I know how that goes.
The only difference is in a commercial environment, they would typically spray the etchant with high pressure nozzles. And the benefits of spray etching are it's a lot faster because you're exposing, the oxide material that's formed in the reaction is being flushed away. And the directionality of the nozzles means you get less of that etching sideways under the mask that I talked about earlier. That's such a problem.
Okay. So how do you? Because my mind's going to applying the acid. How are you putting that on?
Well, typically I'm submerging it in a tank, and I made a little bubbler system. Maybe 2-3 psi coming out of a bunch of drilled holes in a PVC manifold that just agitates the liquid. If you don't do that, if you just hang a masked piece of copper or brass in a tank full of ferric chloride, gravity alone causes convection currents as the oxide forms and falls away, and it starts cascading down the face of the part. You wind up with these really cool but generally undesirable kind of waterfall etched surface patterns in the background of your etch that can show through even after color fill. Okay. And so it's usually better if you randomize the way the liquid moves around the part.
And when you say color fill, like, is this where you're literally, is it you're just filling the lower portions of it with a material?
Yes. And I will add, traditionally that would have been an enamel process. In the early days, there was probably what they call Japanning, which is like a creosote-based black material that would have been baked into that recess that was, pretty chemical resistant. You can still find some of those today on really old machines. Later, it would have been, like an alkyd enamel, and then even later than that, maybe an acrylic enamel. The problem is always, how do you keep it off of the face of the part? And in a commercial process, that mask that masked it during etching would also remain in place for the color fill. And then there's a process of removing that mask after the color fill is in place to get back to the bare metal. From a practical perspective, working at home, you're just abrading that, maybe face down, upside down on a piece of sandpaper on a nice flat surface like a granite block.
Okay. And when you switched over to the laser, I mean, how did this process change on you from, going from this different process, like just a completely different process?
Yeah. So the chemical etching was my entree, um, and I made it work. I didn't like it. The ferric chloride, again, the knife makers will know it stains everything it
Hmm.
touches. If you let it evaporate around anything metal, it's going to corrode it. Um, you really got to keep it outside, away from anything sensitive. And I had a close call where I had a tank leak, and almost had an issue with a neighbor.
Whew.
So I had to find something different. And at this point, um, my buddy at the laser shop had convinced me to go get the laser. And it turns out the laser really doesn't care what metal it's ablating.
Mm-hmm.
It will do steel, it will do aluminum, it'll do brass. It'll do aluminum faster than brass, but that's just the physics of how the laser works. But at the end of the day, it'll do pretty much any metal. So now you load the sheet of material into the laser and program it, and you start the laser running back and forth, doing its uh, pattern of etching. And think of the laser kind of like a really precise paintball gun. It's shooting out little splats of high intensity photons at
Mm-hmm.
the material. And so every time it hits the metal, it makes a microscopic little crater. And then as it sweeps back and forth across the part, and these craters I'm talking about are like, 1 to 2 thousandths of an inch in diameter. They're really tiny.
Mm-hmm.
So you sweep back and forth across the part, and you do that 30, 40, 50 times, and now you're down to a depth where you can hold the color and still be able to sand the face back to bare metal without scratching your color. Now, I migrated very quickly from liquid paints to powder coating,
Mm-hmm.
and there's lots of advantages of powder coating, but one of the advantages is you can powder coat over the face of the whole part. You can minimally cure the powder. I'm talking even with a heat gun, or just a couple minutes in the oven, either way,
Mm-hmm.
and get the powder to flow out just enough to adhere. Then you abrade the face, sand the face back to bare metal, do whatever polishing you want to do. You can even put it on a buffing wheel at this point
Mm-hmm.
and get a really nice polish if you're careful. And then you wash the plate, clean it up, dry it, and then you stick it in the oven for the full cure. And if you happen to have made any inadvertent scratches in the color fill, at this point the powder reflows, all the scratches go away, and 30 minutes later, you have a finished part ready to ship.
Wow.
It's a beautiful thing. I love powder coating, and it's, by the way, it's way more durable than paint,
Yeah. And no acids
and
around.
no acids.
Yeah. No leaky tanks. Oh, that sounds like it really changed the game for you in the process
Totally.
of
And
it.
and there's a gentleman, I can't take credit for it. There's a gentleman, I can't remember his last name right now. His first name's Ed, and he was employee of John Saunders at NYCCNC, now Saunders Machine Works. Some of you may follow John's YouTube channel and CNC machining. But Ed made a little plate for a measurement tool back, I don't know, well, it was around the time I was starting out experimenting with different color fills.
Mm-hmm.
And he showed this powder coat approach, and I was hooked
Yeah.
instantly. So I've been doing powder ever since. And the only time I do liquid paint now is if I have a very specific color code I have to match.
Okay.
I still hate it.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure it's got to be delicate then at that point. A lot more delicate than doing the powder coating.
It is. If you have a really deep etch, using liquid color fill is not a big problem. You can put it in a little syringe kind of squeeze bottle and let surface tension kind of flow it out and fill the space. But if you're on a very shallow part, most of my etching is 5 to 8 thousandths deep, to look traditional.
Mm-hmm.
That's a little more problematic to do with liquid paints.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it really sounds like you've had a really cool journey making these things and figuring out uh again back to the point where you're at now with it.
You know.
How many plates did you mess up in the process?
Yeah, well, I have a box. I have my box of shame, like everybody. Yeah, to keep me humble. I will say though, for anybody who is listening to this thinking, "Hey, I'd like to give that a shot," I just want to reemphasize 2/3 of what I do is artwork. You got to have good artwork, and I will use customers' artwork from time to time because it saves them some money.
Mm-hmm.
It usually doesn't do me any favors at all, though, because I end up spending a lot of time converting. They want to make it in, AutoCAD and send me a DXF file. uh, DXFs are notorious, for coming in with polylines and millions of little arcs and segments that aren't joined and everything. The laser doesn't work, so I ended up having to fix it anyway. But um, you got to have a way to generate vector artwork, and the free version of that is called Inkscape.
Hmm.
And Inkscape is a great piece of software. Once you get past the steep learning curve, I recommend go to YouTube and find a couple of the creators that have good Inkscape tutorial series. And then the more professional paid version is Adobe Illustrator.
Okay.
And I'll be honest, I'm really good at Inkscape.
Mm-hmm.
I'm still learning Illustrator, and I use Illustrator mostly to convert other formats into a format that I can use on the laser right now. So
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of on my goal for this year, is to get more proficient with Adobe Illustrator,
Mm-hmm.
especially since I'm paying like $300 a year for it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Saying you had the box of shame. Uh, I'm sure those plates still look good though. The ones you're throwing away if they're even halfway through the process. Uh,
Well, yeah, I mean, they might be interesting. I wouldn't say they look good.
yeah.
There's lessons, you can look at it and go how not to do things, but
Okay.
mostly they're just fails.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I've seen some of the ones that you've shared in the past, where even just one letter being off, or maybe it was missing a letter, because again, to the listener, these plates get really complicated, and the lettering gets so small.
Yeah.
It's easy to be off.
I'm holding a plate in my hand right now. It's off a project I just shipped. This is a plate I had to remake.
Hmm.
This is for a big horizontal boring machine, um, going to Kyle Vanover's shop up in Chicago, that he's doing a YouTube restoration series on
Oh,
for his
cool.
Lucas boring mill. And idiot me, I got all the way to the end. I'd even finished the color fill, and I bring it inside to package the thing up, and I realized there's this little speck on it. And I got to looking, and I'm like, oh, that's not a speck. That's actually etched into the metal and filled with color. And it was a copy of a comma from elsewhere on the plate
Uh-huh.
that somehow I had managed to cut and paste and drop into the file, and the laser just etched it.
Wow.
And it's small enough that I missed it, not paying attention until I had the contrast of the red color fill on the
Yeah.
aluminum background to see it. So
Hmm.
I had to go make him a new one. But I do that. I have pretty high standards for myself, and
Yeah.
people, frankly, people pay me a lot of money, relatively a lot
Hmm.
of money. These plates are not cheap.
Yeah.
Um, and I don't know how curious people are to know, but I don't mind sharing.
Hmm.
An average one-off plate might be $250 to get to the first new copy of a plate.
Yeah.
Why? Because of the artwork.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
charge a flat hourly rate for the artwork and laser programming time, and then per piece fabrication charge depending on the quantity. If I can set up and run just one, it's a certain amount of money, and
Hmm.
if I can set up and run 3 or 4 copies in the same setup, then the unit cost is a lot less. But that artwork fee typically is what makes or breaks me getting a job that I quote.
Hmm.
And
That
so I try to do a really good high fidelity trace so that the end plate looks like the original would have looked new.
that sounds very reasonable to me. I mean, there's a lot on especially a one-off plate to just do one. And would you say most of your business is typically a one-off plate, or
Um,
or at least a small series of them versus a
yeah,
large production?
yeah, I 95% is one-offs.
Wow. That's
And
yeah.
occasionally I'm overjoyed when I get to tell a customer when an RFQ comes in, I get to tell them, hey, good news, I already have artwork for your plate. I've already
That's
made it.
that's great.
And that's always a really good day. Unfortunately, I have a run rule in the shop. The
Hmm.
first user pays for the artwork
Yeah.
because I never know if there's going to be a repeat order on that layout ever
Hmm.
again. And most of the time, there is not.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and that's got to make I don't want to say it's a challenge, but versus I mean, a Beverly Shear nameplate would be a common type of plate that you could see.
Yep.
And then I'm sure some of them look the same, but there's slight differences over the years that don't let you reproduce it to
You
exactly the
are
same plate.
exactly right. So that's a great example. Anybody who's familiar with a Beverly throatless shear, like a B2, B3, B4 kind of common bench tool, the design changed over the time. And originally, there's a layout I've done. I call it the Chicago 44 version, and
Hmm.
the 44 was call it their zip code at the time where the factory was located.
Hmm.
And then there's the Chicago 55 version, I think when they moved the factory. And then later there's no zip code or postal code at all.
Hmm.
So it absolutely depends, and every time it's not a complete start over
Hmm.
typically, but at least an update to the artwork file and the laser program.
Yeah. Yeah. And that changes a lot because I mean, what if the uh I don't know what you call the little rivets that they typically you can tap them in. They kind of have um, the spiral shaft where it actually latches into the metal. Um,
Most people call them drive screws,
okay.
but you'll see drive rivet and you'll see U dash drive screws if you're searching for these things on the internet.
Hmm.
There's multiple names, but it's basically a high high angle helix multi start screw that you just pound in with a hammer into a tight fitting hole.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, if those are off a quarter inch from one, it looks exactly the same nameplate, but they changed the year and it went off a quarter inch. I mean, that's you redesigning that individual piece.
Well, I will say this too. Most of the tags I ship undrilled
Hmm.
unless the customer has given me, shipped me their original to use as a drill template,
Hmm.
because a lot of the mounting holes were just drilled at the time of installation by hand. And so
Ah,
they vary quite a bit.
yeah.
And if I'm off by half of a fastener width, then, I've ruined the plate.
Hmm. That makes sense. Yeah. Do you prefer people sending you the exact plate that you're
I do.
recreating?
I do. And it's always going to give us the best chance of a high fidelity etching mask, and it's only really when the plate's been lost that we're working from photos or drawings or something that we have to do that. I'd
How
much prefer to scan the plate on my flatbed scanner, pull it into the software, and just trace right over the top of it for a very accurate etching mask.
a lot of these one-off plates, uh, a lot of them are damaged, and there's nothing else. Like, how does that complicate it for you? Are you able to find, uh, I don't know, original photos if you're missing a section of the plate?
Yeah. I'm working right now with a customer on a Willys, I guess it's a Willys Jeep project, and the tag that he has, so they put tags on the engine blocks, and they were aluminum riveted to a cast iron block. So galvanic corrosion city. There's my engineering background coming out. Um, Down in an engine bay where it's wet and salty, and it's a disaster. So his plate is he's got about 2/3 of a plate. The left third is almost all gone, and the lower right corner is pretty much gone. And the unique things about the Willys plate is they came, when they were installed new, they came embossed with the engine number on the main part of the tag, and then they had tear off tabs, one on each end, with the same engine embossed number. And then I guess at certain maintenance intervals or something, the mechanics would tear off those tabs at each end, and they had a hole in them, and I don't know what they would do with them. Maybe they put them in the glove box or
Mm-hmm.
keep them as a record of maintenance being done. I'm not sure, but
Yeah.
both of those were gone. And so we had to go get a photo of another block's existing plate, and then I bring it in, kind of set the transparency to 50% on both of them and overlay them, and then I can use his tag for the scaling and then use the photo, squish it around until everything lines up to find where the edges used to be. So you have to get creative. I spend a fair amount of time looking for pictures on the internet, looking for old catalogs, PDFs of catalogs people have scanned, instruction manuals. If it's woodworking machinery, my friend Keith Rucker, he's got a site called vintagemachinery.org where he's amassed probably the best collection of user manuals and industry documentation for a lot of these old tools. I can usually find a logo in there somewhere or something if I need to.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Yeah. Uh, the process of these plates and kind of listening to this story of you going and figuring out to this point, it's that this stuff I love it. That's just one of the things. Like I said, I think that to me the nameplates come off as like there's people that like watches, like the nameplates or something that I get that same feeling out of it.
Sure.
It's partly.
I will say, I will always encourage someone to try to restore their original nameplate.
Mm-hmm.
I will always discourage them from trying to send it to me to restore. I've I've tried and failed too many times, and my standards are too high. I always feel bad at sending something back that I'm not happy with.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't do restorations on originals anymore. But I would encourage anybody to give that a shot. Your challenges are just not enough etch depth left after all the years of oxidation, and they're always going to be dented and dinged and nicked and scratched and have holes in them that
Yeah.
make that process even harder.
Mm-hmm.
But it is possible if you're super patient, and better yet, if you happen to have a good stereo microscope to work under, that helps a lot.
Hmm. Are there any plate builds in particular that were just your favorite to do?
Oh golly, man, I don't know. I love the old 1920s and 30s maker badges for the old cars. I've had a few of those, very special builds that
Mm-hmm.
got invited to display at Pebble Beach
Yeah.
and other shows like that. So those are always fun.
Mm-hmm.
I try to do my very best work on stuff like that, just out of respect for the original designers.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the old equipment manufacturers, uh, man, they have some really crazy complex logos like Oliver Woodworking Machinery. They have some of the most beautiful tags that you'll ever see anywhere.
Wow. Multicolored or?
Yeah, multicolored and very complex designs with they have a bird theme. There's an eagle kind of motif they used for their different tags, and they're just really beautiful pieces of art,
Mm-hmm.
even though it's just an etching in brass. But
Yeah.
man, they pop.
Well, there's some. I mean, you see some of these World War II machines, and even some equipment that tells you where this machine was in a time period. I've seen some of these plates get pretty interesting, and the historical value of the machine itself. I'm sure you've ran across some of that too.
Yeah, I've done a few things for people restoring things that belong to their ancestors.
Mm-hmm.
I did a set about a year and a half ago, a full set for a Navy radio receiver set that a gentleman's father had used in the war and then picked up surplus after the war and brought home. And, it was like a ham radio station.
Hmm.
And he did a full restoration. It's one of these old, with tube type amplifiers inside it. He went through the whole thing, and then I did the tags for it, and it was very special for him.
Any any unusual requests?
Unusable in what way?
I'm sorry, unusual.
Oh, unusual. Yeah. Um, During COVID, I got a request from a gentleman whose best friend owned a restaurant, and COVID had basically pushed his restaurant almost into bankruptcy, and then he had a pizza oven failure.
Oh
And
no.
so my customer's gift to his friend was to go fix his pizza oven, and part of that pizza oven restoration had me make a new nameplate for it.
Wow. So this is an older machine then.
No, it's just something from probably the 80s or 90s, but
Okay.
he wanted to do it upright, so
Yeah.
had me make a pizza oven label. Lately I've been getting more requests from plane owners
Hmm.
that need signage, or they call them placards, inside the cockpit of an airplane with maybe mods they've done to be FAA compliant. Um, I'm getting more requests for custom electrical controls, like the big set I just shipped for this for Kyle Vanover's horizontal boring machine. He's upgrading all the electrical controls, and Kyle came up with a kind of an outline of a control legend, the little nameplate that goes behind each switch
Hmm.
that tells you what it does, for Allen Bradley industrial switches.
Wow.
And so we went and looked up the spec for what that outline around the actual switch interface with the keyed slot needed to be. And then Kyle designed and 3D printed kind of I don't know, maybe what I would call like a 1950s kind of Art Deco style
Oh, that's cool.
outline
Yeah.
of the shape of the tag. And then I added the text and etched and color filled, so he gets a custom electrical control that looks like it might have been period correct for the machine.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think I hope, I mean, whoever's listening, I hope like they understand that some of my questions to you are genuine in the way of I'm nerding out on this, because I know as far as like I have a and I'm drawing a blank on this specific name of this box that I have, but I have an on-off switch, an industrial one.
Yeah.
Um, that even it's rounded on and off, red buttons. You actually push it in. When you push the on button, the off button pushes out.
Yeah.
I wish I can remember the name of it right now, but it has its own riveted plate on there too. Like that's how, like, it's a beautiful piece. It's just a wall on off switch, but even that has its own tiny plate. It has two rivets on the side, multicolored. It's a beautiful little plate, maybe about an inch in width. And but that's how, even back in the day, I believe that thing might be from the 50s. I'm not sure, but even back then they were still doing beautiful pieces like that, because even the face of it has an Art Deco look to it, and that's where, like, it goes that far. It goes as far as like electrical switches also having their own plates on them.
Well, so you reminded me of something that's kind of funny, and I don't want you to have to bleep anything out here. I'm not going to use the actual expletive, but a customer had me make something very much like what you just described, surrounds for two push button controls on
Hmm.
an old Wadkin woodworking machine up in Canada. And he wanted to say F on and F off.
That's awesome.
So, so yeah, we can customize anything.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, no, that's cool. I love that. That's again, whether even for the modern stuff, to be able to make these plates for that kind of stuff, where it's not just something you just glued onto the side and it just says on and off. It's a beautiful piece. I actually, I'm genuinely like, I enjoy seeing that kind of stuff. Overall, I really think there's an aesthetic that I'd love to see a lot of it come back into the industry where some of this equipment, and I think you described this earlier, where it's like there's a pride in it, and that to me is part of that pride of like, look what we built, and you're gonna feel good around the thing that we made.
Sure.
Uh, so you know, we've gone along with all the plates, and I love that business that you're creating. Um, but there's also more to you aside from working at Raytheon and these plates. But you've been building a little facility for yourself in these plates, right?
Yeah, I mean, I work out of my home currently. I would love to not do that, but it is a side business still, and
Mhm.
economics being what they are,
Yeah.
I haven't quite made that financial leap yet to be able to pay rent outside, real money, I
Yeah.
call it. Um, so I'm in the process right now. I've been doing this about 6 or 7 years, and my home shop, which is basically a 2.5 car garage and then a separate 1 car garage with no cars inside.
Hmm.
Over the years, between just tools I've collected and tools I use every day, I'm kind of out of space, and so I'm trying to get better organized. And my big project for the year right now, each year I try to take on, one big project that makes life easier for me. The project this year is toolboxes.
Hmm.
And I'm right in the middle of a big project to restore 22 Stanley Vidmar toolboxes in different sizes and shapes. And some are kind of the typical Vidmar box that most people will be used to, that's about 5 feet tall and 30 by 30 with drawers. And I do have some of those in this group. And then I have some short ones that stack on top of those. And then I have some other configurations, that are down low to make workbenches and so forth. So
Hmm.
there's 22 of these boxes that I've collected. The ones with drawers, there's a total of about 50, I think 53 drawers that I'll have when I'm done. And then the rest are shelf cabinets, just a door with shelves inside, no drawers. And it's turned out to be, I probably bit off more than I could chew, waiting to start all of them at the same time. First off, storing them, um, moving them, they're heavy. And then, of course, me being me, I want them to look good and look uniform. So what started out as about 6 colors, from, safety yellow to blue to black to rust, for
Hmm.
ones I picked up from outdoor salvage yards, um, sandblasting, body working, painting, well, priming, painting, um, new hardware. Uh,
Connie here from the Working Class Women and a proud sponsor of today's episode. Back in 2019, we teamed up with SATA USA to create the Pro Series Ladies Paint Suit, the first paint suit designed specifically for women. Every feature was built to solve the problems we've dealt with in the traditional suits, starting off with the princess cut that gives you a tailored fit, no more baggy and oversized feel. We all know the anxiety that it brings when you're leaning over a panel. The built-in knee pads definitely add some comfort. The traditional zippers on each side that give you easy pocket access or even better airflow when you need it. The pinstripes that go down the suit are actually carbon fiber lines that help with the static control. These suits are also washable. And of course, you can find our original Girls Behind the Gun logo that's on the back, along with the Goddess Behind the Gun design that's on the shoulder. And these aren't just gear. These are representing of progress. They've helped break down the barriers and make a real difference even in my own career. So grab yours today at aworkingclass.bigcartel.com or through your local SATA distributor. Are you outside the United States? Your best option is our online store. And ladies, just a reminder, you have a place in this industry too.
it was, I guess, originally a Chrysler color that they called minty. It's kind of a pale gray green color,
Okay.
but the outsides, I'm doing all the kind of interior surfaces between myself and a friend with a shop, um, doing single stage urethane on all the interiors and all the drawer surfaces. And then once I get to that stage, I take them to a local body shop where a gentleman who's got a real spray booth is doing the Earl Grey paint
Hmm.
and clear on top of it, so that I wind up with an actual automotive finish on the outside.
Yeah, that sounds like they're going to be stunning when they're done. Uh,
Well, my friend offered to come over and scratch the first one for me, so I wouldn't have to.
that's going to be the hardest part now is final assembly. Ooh, that's a lot of work to get a scratch.
Yeah, but I put all new drawer pulls, and where needed, new hardware. A lot of them came with locks that were long. The keys were long missing, so the locks
Mhm.
have been removed, and so they have delete caps that go in those missing lock holes, and all that you can still order from Stanley. It's
Yeah.
not super cheap, but
Mhm.
they are still around and do support their products.
What's the age range of these toolboxes?
The earliest date stamping I found on one was early 70s, and the latest was late 90s.
Okay.
And they migrated over time. They went from look like alkyd enamel paints to powder coating.
Hmm.
And so even painting over powder coating, has been a concern that we've had to work through with,
Yeah.
primers and that sort of thing.
Yeah, for sure. The making sure you have a good cross link between the two materials.
Yep.
Yeah, there's a lot that goes into a lot of what you're doing there. Uh,
I did not anticipate when the project started spending like 5 times the cost of the cabinets just on paint.
yeah.
That's been kind of an eye opener, and I'm using a set of PPG products
Hmm.
for no particular reason other than there's a PPG store here in town that
Yeah.
I have access to.
Yeah. Well, and you're also going for that specific color.
Yeah.
So those automotive paints are going to get you that specific color, and they're really nice finish. I mean, you look at most toolboxes nowadays, and they're pretty textured, and they're usually in like a semi-gloss or some kind of flat finish. Um, are you doing all this in gloss?
Yeah, it's
Okay.
all just, it looks like a real car finish
Yeah.
when it's done. I considered doing powder coating. I'm a big fan of powder coating, but
Hmm.
of course I don't have an oven that size. And so
Yeah.
when I went to find quotes, they said, sure, we'll do that.
Hmm.
It'll be $12 a square foot
Yeah.
inside and out. And oh, by the way, we don't have a recommended way of doing any body work under powder coat.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's a project what you have there. Definitely, that's a lot of toolboxes, and going with the age range that you're talking about. You said you're learning about body work, and even I'm sure you're having to do a bunch of metal work to straighten out a lot of these parts too.
Yep. There's a little bit of welding, filling in holes and that sort of thing, but mostly it's pounding out dents and
How
getting them smooth.
I was gonna say how before you started this project, were you a little hesitant to jump into this, or were you all in?
I was all in, man. I was optimistic. I'm like, this is going to be a piece of cake. How
Hmm.
hard can this be?
That's how any great
And
project starts.
I've spent, I don't know how many times I've driven, three at a time, because that's what'll fit in the back of my F-150
Yeah.
across town, either to
Hmm.
my friend's shop, or to the body shop for paint or picking them up. And you can't really have the drawer guides installed when you're doing any of the painting,
Hmm.
so you got to transport the drawers separately. And everything about a Stanley Vidmar cabinet is heavy. It's all like 11 gauge steel or 12 gauge steel.
Wow.
But when it's all done, I'm going to have all these wonderful drawers that are either 30 inches wide, 45 inches wide, or 60 inches wide, and every one of them is rated for 400 pounds of weight, full extension.
Whoa.
So they'll be my forever cabinets, and whoever gets them after I'm dead will still
Yeah.
have some good cabinets.
They'll have some really nice cabinets. I like that you have like a vision for it, and that you're, even though it's a project that however long it's going to end up taking, you're sticking to what you originally had in mind.
Yeah, I'm kind of stubborn that way. Um, I just can't. Man, it's the hardest thing for me in the world to declare failure. Just give up.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
will keep beating my head against a wall until I figure out a process,
Yeah.
and sometimes to my detriment.
There is
Um,
no other way. I mean, it's I think, not to say that it is giving up, but giving up definitely has its toll that it'll take.
yeah,
Uh, so that's cool. I really I'm enjoying seeing the process. Seeing the stuff that you put on Instagram has been, again, it's a niche side of the industry. I think I would love to see more people getting into that. Um, but a few days ago when you and I had talked, there was a couple things that, aside from the plates and all that, I think we touched on it a little bit at the beginning of the podcast and some of the education stuff. But getting back into the trades and college versus being in the trades, um, you know, that's something that, with listening to your background and everything, uh, it's interesting to hear you be so adamant about the trades and getting people more involved versus college.
yeah.
Uh,
I love the messaging coming from Mike Rowe. If folks are familiar with him and Mike
yeah,
Rowe Works and his advocacy for the trades, I'd love to see more of that. I frankly, I wish I had a way to get involved in it. I don't really know how to do that myself, but I think, you know, there'd be some interesting perspective coming from somebody who's, got graduate degrees advocating for blue collar work. But I think AI is going to really bubble this up to the surface because there are a lot of blue collar jobs that are, at least for now, AI proof
hmm
or at least AI resistant.
yeah,
And I don't know. I think we as a nation need to reevaluate how we educate our kids and the expectations we set for them coming out of school with a big student loan debt and being basically unemployable. That model's not working anymore.
yeah, yeah. I the whole AI conversation. I definitely see where a lot of it, there's a lot of information out there. There's a lot of solid information that it's just, at one point is the AI program's going to get to where you don't need a lawyer. It's just going to be an AI program. Uh, versus in our industry, the hands-on work that we have to do, I see it as like it would end up becoming another tool in our arsenal
Yeah.
of the thing. Maybe some things it may you find a way to help you in certain things, but I really see the on the educational side, it can really help the blue collar person understand more. I don't know how that's going to what it's going to end up meaning for equipment and how that process of equipment, even machinery, goes as far as like CNC. Um, how that's going to change for the individual that's running the equipment, or how many people are going to end up running a lot of these machines. Um, but at least for us on the automotive side, when I look at, you're always going to need people that have to do body work. You're going to need somebody to weld in that panel, or even shape a panel. Uh, and like I said, I see the tool side of the AI of going, okay, well, maybe how do I understand shape more, where some of these niche things, it's hard. You have to find the right person to show you a very specific thing. And I can see where that kind of broadens some of that. Uh, do you see that in, at least in like a Raytheon, are you guys having an issue finding people to come into your industry?
Um, we are, but maybe not for the reasons that we're talking about right now.
Okay.
Um, because of the nature of some of the work that we do as defense contractors, we work in classified environments, and that does not mix well with the trend of working from home, working remotely. Um, You can't do classified work at home, for instance. You have to go to where the classified work is to do that kind of work. You have networks that are air gapped away from the rest of the internet, and you're behind doors that are behind doors that are behind doors sometimes, and that requires working on site. And a lot of folks nowadays coming out of college, they really don't like being tied to an office or a cubicle, and they like the freedom of being able to work from home and work in their pajamas. So that's not a great fit for
Yeah.
some parts of our industry. The other thing is we, for good reasons, we're risk averse when it comes to adopting new software tools and new electronics, advances in electronics, because we've qualified and proven a design that works. And so kids coming out of school have learned, the latest programming language, and then they come to work at Raytheon their first day and they're like, oh, you guys are still using COBOL? You're still using Fortran on this missile system? Oh, you're using C+? Well, where's JavaScript? Yeah, we don't use JavaScript. Or like I'm probably way outside my swim lane right now. I'm not a software engineer, but in general, we're a late adopter of technology because we would like other people to find those weak spots before we build them into a weapon system and it gets exploited by somebody.
Do you think a lot of that is that the technology moves? Maybe I'm saying it right or wrong, but is it moving faster than we're keeping up with?
It does, and it's more than just the technology. Even so, we go through this long process of designing and qualifying a new weapon system, and we get it into production, and then immediately we have electronics go obsolete. Why? Because we are using, a few hundred a year of a chip that the cell phone industry uses 10 million a year of, and they've moved on to the new architecture. And now suddenly we've got to go redesign the circuit board that component lives on, and then requalify it in all of the flight environments and make sure it still works so that it's safe to use and effective for whatever mission it has to fly. So we spend a fair amount of time doing redesigns just to keep up with the obsolescence spins that comes with all these advances in technology.
Does that make it harder for the youth coming into the industry?
No, I think with the youth coming in, I don't know, we could have a whole podcast just on the topic of generational differences, but I laugh because I'm realizing daily that, I'm the old guy at work. I'm not the F and G anymore. And you get perspective on cultural norms and workplace norms, hierarchies and things, and the new kids come in, they just literally don't have any I don't know if it's they don't have a concept of it. They just don't care. They just don't respect hierarchies as much. And the struggle is how to balance the talent that they bring and the sense of innovation that they can bring uh, to the job with their expectations of getting their parents' salary and standard of living 2 years out of college. It's a hard balance sometimes.
It's like at a, it's like let's see if my analogy sticks here. It might be worthless, but we'll see. It's like the technology changing, as fast as it can, and not being able to keep up with it, or the processes uh, at a people level. I guess that's what's happening too. Is culturally things shift, and then your generation experiencing what it experienced uh, versus these next generations and what they're experiencing. Because at least for me, that's how I'm a manager at a shop in South Florida, and like you see these different personalities come in and where they're at just as a person, and it's just interesting. I think of that with the students too, or the youth coming into the industry, and you've been doing what you've been doing for over, 20, 25 years, and even all the experiences you've had before that. And how many people now are even have an experience, if they're 5 years into what they're doing, but they don't have the woodworking background that you had. They don't have all these other great opportunities that you were exposed to earlier on, uh, that helped you become who you are now. And what about these newer generations not having that? Do you think that affects them too, as far as wanting to come into the industry?
Um, I don't know. I don't know how, if or how it influences their desire to come into the industry.
Mm-hmm.
I think it certainly impacts their effectiveness once they're in it, though.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the kids coming out of college just come with, and I don't mean this in a pejorative way, it's just an observation. They need more care and feeding,
Mm-hmm.
and they need more hand holding than maybe our generation did. Maybe we were thicker skinned, and maybe we had more life experiences. I think what they bring though is the creativity, and the maybe the best thing they bring is just a complete intolerance for the bureaucracy.
Mm-hmm.
And so that helps us older generation realize, hey, just because it's the way it's always been done, maybe that's not the way we should keep doing it.
Yeah, yeah. There's especially as things change, or we're exposed to new technology that lets us that gives us more opportunities with what we're doing.
Yeah.
Uh, it's like trying to find that crossover between the two, the different generations. Because I feel exactly what you're feeling. I mean, I'm 39 years old. I've been in the industry for, I believe, over 24 years now. Um, so I've seen my own versions of this, and I definitely want to see more of these younger generations coming in. And I think it's going to be important for us to also kind of recognize where they're at, in their life, to figure out how we're going to get them more exposed to what we're doing, how to be efficient, how to, look at things differently, uh, but then also combine with them in all the new stuff that they know. I think I think there's a lot to the conversation of bringing in younger generations to do uh, machine work, mechanical engineering, auto body, paint work, all those things. And, I think the approach that we're going to have to take, maybe a new approach. I don't know. I think there's something there, and we have to reach out to these other generations to bring them in, because they're a part of it, and we need them in the industry.
Yeah. I'll go back to my earlier comment about, how gratifying it is to hold something in your hand that was a thought in your brain maybe the day before. A lot of the new kids have never experienced that. The closest they may have come to something like that is 3D printing somebody else's model.
Yeah.
Um, However, we can bridge that gap and get them exposure to it early. And
Hmm.
by early, I mean like junior high school,
Yeah.
maybe sooner.
Yeah.
Help them pick that path that's fulfilling and adds value to society and allows them to earn, a standard of living that they're comfortable with.
Hmm.
Um, Not everyone wants to be rich.
Hmm.
Some people do, and some people can get rich from blue collar work, and some people can get rich from white collar work.
Hmm.
At the end of the day, though, are they happy? That's really what I'm looking for. Is
Absolutely.
how do you how do you help a person feel fulfilled and proud of what they do? If all you do every day is make PowerPoint slides,
Hmm.
which frankly in my industry, above a certain level, that's a lot of what we do.
Yeah.
We're providing status of, you know, rear view looking metrics.
Hmm.
Um, it's not always as fulfilling as it could be. You've got to find roles where you can look forward, be more strategic, be more influential. If you're in that kind of mid-career phase where you don't have the leadership role to provide leverage, but you're overseeing the people who are actually doing the work, that can be a very unfulfilling phase of life for some people. So we got to find ways to help people identify, the things that make them happy. And I know of a lot of white collar, you know, salaried workers who are finding second vocations or avocations outside of work at the local makerspace with their little home machine shops or whatever it might be. And social media, in my case, social media has created a marketing channel that feeds me customers and puts me in contact with people who need what I make.
Yeah.
And it's a very interesting dynamic compared to 10, 15, 20 years ago.
That's absolutely. I mean, that's I love the you have to find, if you can find something that speaks to you. There's going to be moments in anyone's career that you do a lot of things that you don't really want to do. Even in the things that you're doing that you love doing, there's going to be somewhere in there, processes in there that maybe it doesn't speak to you, but it's still in the genre of what you like doing.
Yeah.
And being able to power through those is important. Like, there's a lot of things that I don't want to do in my day-to-day, but yeah, you power through it. You know it, you've been there, and it's a part of the entire process. There's no one glamorous thing. There's things, I'm sure, in what you do in your day-to-day that just come off as like, it's not the most interesting thing, but you go through it, and it was a part of that end result that made you go, wow, I made this. I did this really cool thing.
Yeah.
I think part of what I want to, or part of my mission with the podcast is that, so that people understand, like, they listen to your career and how, and the things that you've done that have added to the point of what you're doing now. Well, look at all the time period that went through to get to this point. It's a journey, it's a process, and if you stick to it, you definitely will do great things. And that's kind of my my mission for the youth, to just put that point across, because getting them into the industry, I feel like, is also getting them to understand, like, there's a lot to everything that we do, and there's going to be moments that you may not like this, and it's just part of the process. What's your experience when you look back at your career and you see all the processes you've developed and created? How is that toward, like, if you wanted to tell the youth what it takes to create something great? I don't even know what my question is here. I'm just going off on a rant. When you want to speak to the youth, and what would be your message to them, to the generations that could be coming into the industry now, as far as jumping into an industry?
Yeah. There's so many avenues there. I think one thing that is always a challenge is this: the youth seem to have a sense of entitlement. Um, they expect huge money right away without offering huge value back to their employer. They don't understand the relationship that they have to make value to be, justified having that job in the first place. And of course, there's investments that's made in, young talent to become senior talent. Of course, I get that. But the expectations, and maybe they're influenced by social media. I'm not sure. Maybe they're influenced by just bad parenting. I maybe that's too frank to say, but kids have a lot these days. They're given $1,000 iPhone, in sixth grade, and they think that's normal. To me, that's not normal. It's not how I grew up.
Yeah, yeah, I feel the same.
Um, I would tell kids, be teachable,
Hmm.
be hungry to learn, don't be arrogant, and be patient with us older people, because we're navigating, tricky social waters.
Hmm.
Social norms have changed a lot in the last 10 years,
Yeah.
and that is hard for some of us.
Hmm.
And I don't think that's a failure. Um, I don't think that's you know a weakness of our generation or whatever. It's just an acknowledgement that, hey, you're asking us to accept a lot of things that are, unusual and foreign and new to us.
Hmm.
So be patient as we work our way through it.
Yeah.
Don't assume that a comment comes from the wrong place.
Yeah.
Assume it comes from a good place. They need to seek to understand us as the same as we need to seek to understand them.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's value in both age groups.
Hmm. Yeah, and it sounds like putting in your time. Uh, that sounds like an important aspect of what you're talking about. Uh, the more experience you gain, the more you start. Uh, actually, there's a saying that I really enjoy. It's I'm trying to think of it out of the top of my head. It's beware of unearned wisdom.
Mm,
I don't know if you've heard if you ever heard that, but
no,
uh,
but that's great.
it's there's a wisdom you earn in the time frame of your career that lets you view things very differently. That when I was younger, uh, earlier on in my career, I didn't really understand that aspect. And when I think of the older generations that were before me at the time, there might have been times that I might have gotten upset about certain things, but looking back at it now, I'm like, okay, there was a purpose and there was a reason behind that. And even if you don't know it right away or you can't see it right away, if you're around the right people, you'll catch on and you'll see where the wisdom that they've done, why they earned it, and
Yeah,
it'll show up in the
there's a
process.
I I don't watch a lot of TV. I
Same
watch
here.
probably more YouTube than I watch TV, but there are a couple shows on TV I enjoy, and one of them's Gold Rush. And if you're not familiar with Gold Rush, it follows three or four mining crews up in the Yukon that literally just dig money out of the ground, and there's a lot of mechanical engineering and a lot of, business ownership and just personality interplay that I enjoy watching there.
Hmm.
And one of the main characters on the show is this old timer. He's kind of the old goat miner up there. His name's Tony Beats, and he's a Dutchman with a big personality. And he said one time, lessons are expensive. Good lessons are really expensive. And that stuck with me.
Yeah.
So when I have a failure, I just think, well, if it's a really bad one, I probably learned a lot.
Hmm. Yeah. I think they say, whoever they uh, is there are no failures, uh, just experiences.
Yeah,
Uh, and well, there's definitely failures, but if you learn something from it and you're able to move forward from there, what you gain from that, that's yeah, that's a lot. That's exactly where you want to be when you do have some kind of issue come up.
sure.
And that's one of the biggest learning experiences you can have, which kind of ties into the whole not giving up part. Because if you don't give up on it, you'll actually make it to the other side, and less chances of those issues coming up later on again, because you know where you've been.
Agreed.
Uh, so then, talking about the trades, Uh, so it seems like our future is the tradesman. The value of the tradesmen is going up. Uh, and I don't mean monetarily. I just mean uh, it seems like that's where I think people could find a lot of purpose. Is that what you're thinking too?
Yeah, I mean, of course, there's a spectrum, right? If you're a tradesman, building cookie cutter homes,
Mm-hmm.
you're a framer. Um, I don't know that your situation has changed much
Mm-hmm.
in, with technology advances.
Okay.
If you are a tradesman who has developed a niche and a passion and a high end capability for something artistic, something that um, maybe, how do I say this? Something that improves someone's environment. And by that, high end, say, I don't know, marble
Mm-hmm.
work, um, ornamental iron, those sorts of things. I think there is maybe more of a market. People appreciate hand handmade um, artistry, maybe a bit more. I don't know. Maybe with affluence, people can afford it more. I'm not sure. Maybe it's access through social media to marketing those products to a larger audience. They're easier to find customers. I'm not sure, but I think over time people will start to appreciate handmade, bespoke work
Mm-hmm.
more than cookie cutter, imported from overseas and sold at Walmart. Um, and if you can position yourself to meet that niche, certainly in your industry, in the automotive industry, um, when somebody's willing to lay down 200,000, 300, 400, $500,000 for a high-end car build, that makes opportunities. But you you have to you're not going to fall into those kinds of opportunities overnight, certainly not as the benefiting shop owner doing that work.
Mm-hmm.
um, you mentioned how many years you've been in the automotive refinishing industry.
Yep.
I assume you probably started out sweeping shop floors and sanding bondo, um,
Yep.
somewhere down the line. And I don't know, they say, preparation meets opportunity. You're going to have to be in a position to take advantage of those opportunities when they come along. They're not just going to fall in your lap.
Yeah. No, that's a great way of putting it. There's a there's a lot that goes into a career. Well, Tom, this has been a lot of fun. Again, I've been a fan of your work for a long time. I'm genuinely interested in the plates and what you do. I really enjoy the quality that you go for on it because check it out on Instagram. You definitely want to check, the I still it's artwork. It's a beautiful thing that you create, and you're preserving equipment that I think deserves to be uh, deserves to be preserved. And seeing you go into the automotive and the plates you're making for some of the builders, I love seeing that kind of stuff, and I'm really excited to see more come from you. Uh, I hope some of my questions landed with you. It was fun for me to
It's
talk to
great.
you about what you
Loved it.
do. And Tom, where can people find you?
Um, Certainly on Instagram, just at King Tutley, all one word. The website is www.vonindustrial.com. Um, those are probably the easiest ways to get to me.
Awesome. Well, Tom, thanks for being a part of the show, and you've had a great career. It's good to hear it.
Well, thanks for having me on. It's been very enjoyable, and I hope I didn't get on too much of a soapbox on some of my thoughts about education and career choices, but I think they're important.
Yeah,
And I'm anxious to see where we go as a nation, because what we're doing now isn't working to everybody's needs are different, and we're not addressing a wide enough spectrum right now.
Yeah. I have hope. I think we're going to head in the right direction. And with people like you talking and sharing what you know, we're going to get there. Thanks, Tom.
Thank you.
Thanks again for listening to the Automotive Artistry Podcast. Hopefully you got something out of this conversation, whether it was inspiration, motivation, or just hearing how somebody else approaches the work. If this episode inspired you, one way you can help us is by following, sharing, and leaving a review. It helps our podcast tremendously. Another way you can help support the podcast is by heading over to our online store, aworkingclass.bigcartel.com. You can find us on Instagram at Automotive Artistry Podcast, Automotive Practitioner, and The Working Class Women. We appreciate all of you listening. Let's get on to the next episode.